George's Marvelous Medicine will be the book I will read in ASMR style for you today. So listen carefully to Roald Dahl's story. R-S-M-R Katz. Hello, my little mouse. It is a new day full of an ASMR book, and this time I will read for you George's Marvelous Medicine from Roald Dahl. I already started and read a lot of books from this collection. So if you are into Roald Dahl books or you wish to see more ASMR book stories, then feel free to click yourself through my YouTube account. My name is ASMR Katz, and I'm a heavily tattooed red girl who show you the satisfaction of sound. And sound is not just about reading books. It can be everything. So if you are open-minded to explore ASMR, feel free and click yourself through everything what I have to offer. Like, subscribe, click on the notification bell, and comment if you have some thoughts in mind you want to share with me. Every support is absolutely welcome because I love to show you way more from my little world. George's Marvelous Medicine. The rule would be this: whatever he saw, if it was runny or powdery or gooey, it went in. So let us see what this book have to offer. And when you ask yourself why I have the headphones laying on the floor, it is because this is a high quality recording. So if you want the best of sound satisfaction, put your headphones in as well. Lean back, make yourself comfortable, and enjoy this book together with me. And I can tell you, it have an amazing effect. It have even amazing effect on me. Sometimes I'm tired from reading and I'm yawning. It is so nice because ASMR just calms you down and relax your body and soul. Roald Dahl was a spy, ace fighter pilot, chocolate historian, and medical inventor. He was also the author of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, the BFG, and many more brilliant stories. He remains the world's #1 storyteller. Quentin Blake has illustrated more than 300 books and was Roald Dahl's favorite illustrator. In 1980, he won the prestige Gate Greenway Medal. In 1999, he became the first ever children's laureate, and in 2013, he was knighted for a service to illustration. Introduced George Cranky, Mr. Killy Cranky, Miss Cranky, and Grandma. The book is for doctors everywhere. Warning to the readers: do not try to make George's Marvelous Medicine yourself at home. It could be dangerous. Grandma. I'm going shopping in the village, George's mother said to George on Saturday morning. So be a good boy and don't get up my fish sheaf. This was a silly thing to say to a small boy at any time. It immediately made him wonder what sort of mischief he might get up to. And don't forget to give Grandma her medicine at 11 o'clock, the mother said. Then out she went, closing the back door behind her. Grandma, who was dozing in her chair by the window, opened a wicked later eye and said, "Now, You heard what your mother said, George. Don't forget my medicine. No, Grandma, George said, and just try to behave yourself for once. She is away. Yes, Grandma, George said. George was bored to tears. He didn't have a brother or a sister. His father was a farmer, and the farm they lived on was miles away from anywhere. So there were never any children to play with. He was tired of staring at pigs and hens and cows and sheep. He was especially tired of having to live in the same house as a grisly old grunion of Grandma. Looking after her all by himself was hardly the most exciting way to spend a Saturday morning. You can make me a nice cup of tea for a start, Grandma said to George. That will keep you out of mischief for a few minutes. Yes, Grandma, George said. George couldn't help disliking Grandma. She was a selfish, grumpy old woman. She had pale brown teeth and a small buckered-up mouth like a dog's bottom. How much sugar in your tea today, Grandma? George asked her. 1 spoon, she said, and no milk. Most grandmothers are lovely, kind, helpful old ladies, but not this one. She spent all day and every day sitting in her chair by the window, and she was always complaining, grousing, grouching, grumbling, gripping about something or other. Never once, even on her best days, had she smiled at George and said, "Well, how are you this morning, George?" Or, "Why don't you have a game of snakes and ladders?" Or, "How was school today?" She didn't seem to care about other people, only about herself. She was miserable old grunge. George went into the kitchen and made Grandma a cup of tea with a tea bag. He put on a spoon of sugar in it and no milk. He stirred the sugar well and carried the cup into the living room. Grandma sipped the tea. "It's not sweet enough," she said. "Put more sugar in." George took the cup back to the kitchen and added another spoonful of sugar. He stirred it again and carried it carefully to his grandma. "Where is the sour?" she said. "I want to have a cup without a sour." George fetched her a sour. "And what about a teaspoon, if you please?" "I've stirred it for you, Grandma." "I stirred it well." "I stir my own tea. Thank you very much," he said. "Fetch me a teaspoon." George fetched her a teaspoon. When George's mother or father were home, Grandma never ordered George about like this. It was only when she had him on her own that she began treating him badly. "You know what's the matter with you," the old woman said, staring at George over the rim of the teacup with those bright, wicked little eyes. "You are growing too fast." Boy, who grew too fast became stupid and lazy. "But I can't help it if I'm growing fast, Grandma," George said. "Of course you can," she snapped. "Growing is a nasty, childish habit. But we have to grow, Grandma. If we don't grow, we'd never be grown-ups." "Rubbish, boy, just rubbish," she said, looked at me. "Am I grown?" "Certainly not. But you did once, Grandma. Only very little." The old woman answered. "I gave up growing when I was extremely small, along with all the other nasty childish habits like laziness and disobedience and greed and sloppiness and unintentness and stupidity. You haven't given up any of these things, have you?" "I'm still only a little boy, Grandma." "You're 8 years old," she snorted. "That's old enough to know better. If you don't stop growing soon, it will be too late." "Too late for what, Grandma?" It's ridiculous, she went on. You are nearly as tall as me already. George took a good look at Grandma. She certainly was a very tiny person. Her legs were so short she had half footstool to put her feet on, and her head only came halfway up the back of the archmere. Daddy says it's fine for a man to be tall, George said. Don't listen to your daddy, Grandma said. Listen to me. But how do I stop myself growing? George asked. Eat less chocolate, Grandmother said. Does chocolate make you grow? It makes you grow the wrong way, she snapped. Up instead of down. Grandma sipped some tea, but never took her eyes from the little boy who stood before her. Never grow up, she said. Always down. Yes, Grandma. And stop eating chocolate. Eat cabbage instead. Cabbage? Oh no, I don't like cabbage, George said. It's not what you like or what you don't like, Grandmother snapped. It's what's good for you that counts. From now on, you must eat cabbage 3 times a day. Mountains of cabbage. And if it's good caterpillars in it, so much the better, said George. Caterpillars give your brains, the old woman said. Money, wash them down the sink, George said. Mummies are as stupid as you are, Grandma said. Cabbage doesn't taste of anything without a few boiled caterpillars in it. Not sludges. George cried out. I couldn't eat sludges. Whenever I see a live sludge on a piece of lettuce, Grandma said, I gobble it up quickly before it crawls away. Delicious. She squeezed her lips together tight so that her mouth became a tiny wrinkled hole. Delicious, she said again. Worms and slugs and beetly bugs. You don't know what's good for you. You are joking, Grandma. I never joke, she said. Beetles are perhaps the best of all. They go crunchy. Sorry. Grandma, that's beastly. The old hag grinned, showing those pale brown teeth. Sometimes, if you are lucky, she said, you get a beetle inside the stem of a stick of celery. That's what I like. Grandma, how could you? You find all sorts of nice things in sticks of raw celery, the old woman went on. Sometimes it's earwigs. I don't want to hear about it, cried George. A big fat earwig is very tasty, Grandma said, licking her lips. But you got to be very quick, my dear. When you put one of those in your mouth, it has a pair of sharp nippers on its pig's end, and if it grabs your tongue with those, it never lets go. So you got to do a bite the earwig first. Chop, chop, before it bites you. George started edging towards the door. He wanted to get as far away as possible from this filthy old woman. You're trying to get away from me, aren't you? She said, pointing a finger straight to George's face. You're trying to get away from Grandma. Little George stood by the door staring at the old hag in the chair. She started back at him. Could it be, George wondered, that she was a witch? He had always thought witches were only in fairy tales, but now he was not so sure. Come closer to me, little boy, she said, beckoning to him with a horny finger. Come closer to me, and I will tell you the secrets. George didn't move. Grandma didn't move either. I know a great many secrets, she said, and suddenly she smiled. It was a thin, icy smile, the kind a snake might make just before it bites you. Come over here to Grandma, and she whispered secrets to you. George took a step backwards, adding closer to the door. You must be frightened of your old grandma, she said, smiling that icy smile. George took another step backwards. Some of us, she said, and all the ones she was leaning forward in her chair and whispering in a throaty sort of voice George had never heard used before. Some of us, she said, have magic powers that can twist the creatures of this earth into wondrous shapes. A tingle of electricity flashed down the length of George's spine. He began to feel frightened. Some of us, the old woman went on, have fire on tongues and sparks in our bellies and wizardry in the tips of your fingers. Some of us know secrets that would make your hair stand straight up on end and your eyes pop out at their sockets. George wanted to run away, but his feet seemed stuck to the floor. We know how to make your nails drop off and teeth grow out of your fingers instead. George began to tremble. It was her face that frightened him so much. The frosty smile, the brilliant, unblinking eyes. We know how to have you wake up in the morning with a long tail coming out from behind you. Grandma, he cried. We know secrets, my dear, about dark places where dark things live and squirm and slither all over each other. George made a dive for the door. It doesn't matter how far you run. Her heart, he heard her saying, you won't ever get away. George ran into the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. The marvelous plan. George saw himself down at the table in the kitchen. He was shaking a little. Oh, how he hated Grandma. He really hated that horrid old witchy woman. And all of a sudden he had a tremendous urge to do something about her, something whopping, something absolutely terrific, a real shocker, a sort of explosion. He wanted to blow away the witchy smell that hung about her in the next room. He may have been only 8 years old, but he was a brave little boy. He was ready to take this old woman on. I'm not going to be frightened by her, he said softly to himself. But he was frightened, and that's why he wanted suddenly to explode her away. Well, not quite away, but he didn't want to shake the old woman up a bit. Very well then, what should it be, this whooping, terrifying, exploding shocker from Grandma? He would have liked to put a firework banger under her hair, but he didn't have one. He would have liked to put a long green snake down the back of her dress, but he didn't have a long green snake. He would like to have to put 6 black threads in the room with her and lock the door, but he didn't have 6 big black rats. As George sat there pondering this interesting problem, his eye fell upon the bottle of Grandma's brown medicine standing on the sideboard. Rotten stuff it seemed to be. 4 times a day, a large spoonful of it was swallowed into her mouth, and it didn't do her slightest bit of good. She was always just as horrid after she had it as she'd been before. The whole point of medicine surely was to make a person bitter. If it didn't do that, then it was quite useless. So, thought George suddenly, I know exactly what I will do. I shall make her new medicine, one that is strong and so fiercey and so fantastic, it will either cure her completely or blow off the top of her head. I will make her a magic medicine, a medicine no doctor in the world had ever met before. George looked at the kitchen clock. It said 10:05. There was nearly an hour left before grandmother's next dose was due at 11. Here we got then, cried George, jumping up from the table. A magic medicine it shall be. So give me a bug and jumping fleer, give me 2 snails and lizards 3, and a slimy scriggler from the sea, and the poisonous sting of a bumblebee, and the juice from the fruit of the juju tree, and the powder bone of wombat's knee, and 100 other things as well, each with a rather nasty smell. I stir them up, I'll boil them long, I mix the stew, I mix the strong, and then, hey-ho, and down it goes. A nice big spoonful, hold your nose. Just gulp it down and have no fear. How do you like it, Granny dear? Will she go poop? Will she explode? Will she go flying down the road? Will she go poof in puff of smoke? Start fizzling like a can of Coke? Who knows? Not I. Let's wait and see. I'm glad it's either you or me. Or, Grandma, if you only knew what I have got in store for you. George begins to make the medicine. George took an enormous saucepan out of the cupboard and placed it on the kitchen table. George, came the shrill voice from the next room. What are you doing? Nothing, Grandma, he called out. You needn't think I can't hear you just because you closed the door. You are rattling the saucepans. I'm just tidying the kitchen, Grandma. Then were silence. George had absolutely no doubts whatsoever about how he was going to make his famous medicine. He wasn't going to fool about wondering whether to put in a little bit of this or a little bit of that. Quite simply, he was going to put in everything he could find. There would be no messing about, no hesitating, no wondering whether a particular thing would knock the old girl sideways or not. The rule would be this: whatever he saw, if it was runny or powdery or gooey, in it went. Nobody had ever made a medicine like that before. If it didn't actually cure Grandma, then it would anyway cause something exciting results. It would be worth watching. George decided to work his way around the various rooms, one at a time, and see what they had to offer. He would go first to the bathroom. There are always a lot of funny things in a bathroom. So upstairs he went, carrying the enormous 2-handled saucepan before him. In the bathroom, he gazed longingly at the famous and dreaded medicine cupboard, but didn't go near it. It was the only thing in the entire house he was forbidden to touch. He had made solemn promises to his parents about this, and he was going to break them. There were things in there they had told him that could actually kill a person, and also he was out to give Grandma a pretty fiery mouthful. He didn't really want the dead body on his hands. George put the saucepan on the floor and went to work. Number 1 was a bottle labeled Golden Gloss Hair Shampoo. He emptied it into the pan. That ought to wash her tummy nice and clean, he said. He took the full tube of toothpaste and squeezed it out, the whole lot of it in a long warm. Maybe that will brighten up those horrid brown teeth of hers, he said. There was an aerosol can of superfoam shaving soap belonging to his father. George loved playing with aerosols. He pressed the button and kept his finger on it until there was nothing left. A wonderful mountain of white foam built up in the giant saucepan. With his fingers, he scooped out the contents of a jar of vitamin-enriched face cream. In went a small bottle of Scal nail varnish. "If the toothpaste doesn't clean her teeth," George said, "then this will paint them red as roses." He found another jar of creamy stuff labeled hair remover. "Smeared it on your legs," it said, "and allowed to remain for 5 minutes." George tipped it all in the saucepan. There was a bottle with yellow stuff inside, it called Dishworth's famous dandruff cure. In it went. There was something called Brilliant for cleaning false teeth. It was a white powder. In that went too. He found another aerosol can. "Nevermore Ponking Durant spray guaranteed," it said, "to keep away unpleasant body smells for a while day." She could use plenty of that, George said as he spread the entire canful into the saucepan. Liquid paraffin, the next one was called. It was a big bottle. He hadn't the faintest idea what it did to you, but he poured in anyway. That he thought looking around him was about all from the bathroom. On his mother's dressing table in the bedroom, George found yet another lovely aerosol can. It was called Helga's Hair Set. Hold 12 inches away from the hair and spray it lightly. He squirted the whole lot into the saucepan. He did enjoy squirting those aerosols. Nasty little boy. There was a bottle of perfume called Flowers of Turnips. It smelled of old cheese. In it went. And in too went a large round box of powder. It was called Pink Plaster. There was a powder puff on the top, and he threw that in as well for luck. He found a couple of lipsticks. He pulled the grease red things out of their little cases and added them to the mixture. The bedroom had nothing more to offer, so George carried the enormous saucepan downstairs again and trotted into the laundry room, where the shelves were full of all kinds of household items. The first one he took down was a large box of super white for automatic washing machine. "Dirt," it said, "will disappear like magic." George didn't know whether Grandma was automatic or not, but she was certainly a dirty old woman. "So she better have it all," he said, tipping in the whole box full. Then there was a big tin of Waxwell floor polish. "It removes filth and false message from your floor and leaves everything shiny bright," it said. George scooped the orange-colored waxy stuff out of the tin and plonketed it into the pan. There was a round cardboard carton labeled "Flea powder for dogs. Keep well away from the dog food," it said, "because this powder, if eaten, will make the dog explode." "Good," said George, pouring it all into the saucepan. He found a box of canary seed on the shelf. "Perhaps it all make the old bird sing," he said, and it went. Next, George explored the box with shoe cleaning materials, brushed and tins and dusters. "Well now," he thought, "Grandma's medicine is brown, so medicine must also be brown, or she smell like a rat." The way to color it, he decided, would be the brown shoe polish. The large tin he chose was labeled dark tan. Splendid. He scooped it all out with an old spoon and plopped it into the pan. He would stir it up later. On his way back to the kitchen, George saw a bottle of gin standing on the sideboard. Grandma was very fond of gin. She was allowed to have small nip of it every evening. Now he would give her a treat. He would pour in the whole bottle. He did. Back in the kitchen, George put the huge saucepan on the table and went over the cupboard that served as a larder. The shelves were bulging with bottles and jars of every sort. He chose the following and emptied them one by one into the saucepan. a tiny of curry powder, a tiny of mustard powder, a bottle of extra hot chili sauce, a tin of black pepperons, a bottle of horseradish sauce. There, he said all out. That should do it. George came to Screech's voice from the next room. Who are you talking to in there? What are you up to? Nothing, Grandma, absolutely nothing, he called back. It is time for my medicine yet. No, Grandma, not for about half an hour. Well, just see you don't forget it. I won't, Grandma, George answered. I promise I won't. Animal pills. At this point, George suddenly had an extra good wheeze. Also, the medicine cupboard in the house was forbidden ground. What about the medicine his father's kept on the shelf in the shed next to the hen house? The animal medicines. What about those? Nobody had ever told him he mustn't touch them. Let's face it, George said to himself, hairspray and shaving cream and shoe polish are all very well, and they will not doubt cause some splendid explosions inside the old geezer. But what the magic mixture now needs is a touch of real stuff, real pills and real tonics, to give it a punch and a muscle. George picked up the heavy 3/4 full saucepan and carried it out of the back door. He crossed the farmyard and headed straight for the shed alongside the hen house. He knew his father wouldn't be there. He was out haymaking in one of the meadows. George entered the dusty old shed and put the saucepan on the bench. Then he looked up at the medicine shelf. There were 5 big bottles. 2 were full of pills, 2 were full of runny stuff, and 1 was full of powder. I use them all, George said. Grandma needs them. Boy, does she need them. The first bottle he took down contained an orange-colored powder. The label said, 4 chickens with full pets, hen grip, sore breaks, grammy legs, cockerlits, egg trouble, broodiness or loss of feathers. Mix 1 spoonful only with each bucket of food. Well, George said aloud to himself as he tipped in the whole bottleful. The old bird won't be losing any feathers after she had a dose of this. The next bottle he took down had about 500 giant purple pills in it. For horses with hoarse throats, it said on the label. The hoarse-throated horse should suck on pill twice a day. Grandma may not have a horse that throat, George said, but she's certainly got a sharp tongue. Maybe they cure that inside. Into the saucepan went the 500 giant purple pills. Then there was a bottle of thick yellowish liquid. For cows, bulls and bullocks, the label said, will cure cowpox, cow mink, crumbled horns, bad breath in bulls, ear age, tooth age, head age, hoof age, tail age, and sore udders. That grumpy old cow in the living room has every one of those rotten illnesses, George said. She never at all. With a slop and gurk, the yellow liquid splashed into the now nearly full saucepan. The next bottle contained a brilliant red liquid. Sheep dip, it said on the label, for sheep with sheep rot and for getting rid of ticks and fleas. Mix on spoonful in a gallon of water and slosh it over the sheep. Caution. Do not make the mixture any stronger or the wool will fall out and the animal will be naked. By gum, said George, how I love to walk on a slosh it all over Grandma and watch the ticks and fleas go jumping off her. But I can't. I mustn't. So she will have to drink it instead. He poured the bright red medicine into the saucepan. The last bottle on the shelf was full of pale green pills. Pig pills, the label announced. For pigs, with pork prickles, tender trotters, Bristol blight, and swine sickness. Give 1 pill per day. In 7 cases, 2 pills may be given, but more than that will make the pig rock and roll. Just the stuff, said George, for that miserable old pig back in the house there. She'd need a very big dose. He tipped all the green pills, hundreds and hundreds of them, into the saucepan. There was an old stick lying on the bench that had been used for searing paint. George picked it up and started to stir his marvellous concoction. The mixture was as thick as cream, and as he stirred and stirred, many wonderful colors rose up from the depths and blended together: pink, blues, greens, yellows, and browns. George went on stirring until it was all mixed. But even so, there were still hundreds of pills lying on the bottom that hadn't melted. And there was his mother's splendid powder puff floating on the surface. I shall have to boil it all, George said. 1 good quick boil on the stove is all it needs. And with that he stragged back towards the house with the enormous heavy saucepan. On the way he passed the garage, so he went in to see if he could find another interesting things. He added the following: half a pan of engine oil to keep Grandma's engine going smooth, some antifreeze to keep her radiator from freezing up in winter, a handful of grease to grease her cracking joints, and then back to the kitchen. The cook-up. In the kitchen, George put the saucepan on the stove and turned up the gas flame underneath it as high as it would go. "George," came the awful voice from the next room, "it's time for my medicine." "Not yet, Grandma," George called back. "There are still 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. "What mischief are you up to in there now?" Granny scratched her. "I hear noises." George thought it best not to answer this one. He found a long wooden spoon in the kitchen drawer and began stirring it hard. The stuff in the pot got hotter and hotter. Soon the marvellous mixture began to froth and foam. A rich blue smoke, the color of peacocks, rose from the surface of the liquid, and a fiery, fearsome smell filled the kitchen. It made George choke and splutter. It was a smell unlike any he had smelled before. It was a brutal and batchwing smell, spicy and staggering, fiercey and frenzied, full of wizardry and magic. Whenever he got a whiff of it up his nose, firecrackers went off in his skulls and electric prickles ran along the backs of his leg. It was wonderful to stand there stirring this amazing mixture and to watch it smoking blue and bubbling in front of foam as thought it were alive. At one point, he could have sworn he saw bright sparkles flashing in the thrilling foam. And suddenly, George found himself dancing around the steaming pot, chanting strange words that came into his head out of nowhere. Fiery broth and witch's brew, foam froth and riches blue, fummy and spummy and spundrift spray, fizzles whizzle. Shout hooray! Watch it sloshing, washing, sploshing, hear it hissing, squishing, spicing. Grandma better start to pray. Brown paint. George turned off the heat under the saucepan. He must leave plenty of time for it to cool down. When all the steam and froth had gone away, he peered into the giant pan to see what color the great medicine now was. It was a deep and brilliant blue. "It needs more brown in it," George said. "It simply must be brown or Shaw'll get suspicious." George ran outside and dashed into his feathers tool shelf where all the paints were kept. There was a row of cans in the shelf, all colors: black, green, red, pink, white, and brown. He reached for the can of brown. The label said simple dark brown gloss paint on quart. He took a screwdriver and prizzed off the lid. The can was 13 quarters full. He rushed it back to the kitchen. He poured the whole lot into the saucepan. The saucepan was now full to the brim. Very gentle, George stirred the paint into the mixture with a long wooden spoon. It was all turning brown, a lovely, rich, creamy brown. "Where is the medicine of my boy?" came the voice from the living room. "You're forgetting me. You're doing it on purpose. I shall tell your mother." "I'm not forgetting you, Grandma," George called back. "I'm thinking of you all the time, but there are still 10 minutes to go." "You are a nasty little maggot," the voice screeched back. "You are lazy and disappointment, little worm, and you're growing too fast." George fetched the bottle of Grandma's real medicine from the sideboard. He took out the cork and tipped it all down the sink. He then filled the bottle with his own magic mixture by dipping a small judge into the saucepan and using it as a purer. He replaced the cork. Had it cooled down enough yet? Not quite. He held the bottle under the cold tap for a couple of minutes. The label came off in the wet, but that didn't matter. He dried the bottle with the dishcloth. All was now ready. This was it. The great moment had arrived. "Medicine time, Grandma," he called out. "I should hope so too," came the grumpy reply. The silver tablespoon in which the medicine was always given lay ready on the kitchen sideboard. George picked it up. Holding the spoon in one hand and the bottle in the other, he advanced into the living room. Grandma gets medicine. Oh. Grandma sat hunched in her chair by the window. The wicked little eyes followed George close as he crossed the room towards. "You are late," she snapped. "I don't think that I am, Grandma." "Don't interrupt me in the middle of a sentence," she shouted. "But you finished your sentence, Grandma." "There you go again," she cried, "always interrupting and arguing. You really are tiresome, little boy." "What's the time?" "It's exactly 11 o'clock, Grandma." "You're lying as usual. Stop talking so much and give me my medicine. Shake the bottle first, then pour it into a spoon and make sure it's a whole spoonful." "Are you going to gulp it all down in one go?" George asked her. "Or will you sip it?" "What I do is none of your business," the old woman said. "Fill the spoon." As George removed cork and began very slowly to pour the thick brown stuff into the spoon, he couldn't help thinking back upon all the mad and marvelous things that had gone into the making of his crazy stuff. The shaving soup, the hair remover, the dandruff cure, the automatic washing machine powder, the flea powder for dogs, the shoe polish, the black pepper, the horseradish sauce, and all the rest of them, not to mention powerful animal pills and powders and liquids, and the brown paint. "Open your mouth wide, Grandma," he said. "And I pop it in." The old hag opened her small wrinkled mouth, showing disgusting pale brown teeth. "Here we go," George cried out. "Swallow it down." He pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the result. It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Or!" and her whole body shot whoosh in the air. It was exactly as thought. Someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on the current. Up she went like a jig in the box, and she didn't come down. She stayed there, suspended in midair, about 2 feet up, still sitting in position, but rigid now. Frozen, quivering, the eyes bulging, the hair standing straight up on end. "Is something wrong, Grandma?" George asked her politely. "Are you all right?" Suspended up there in the space, the old girl was beyond speaking. The shock that George's marvelous mixture had given her must have been tremendous. You have thought she swallowed a red-hot poker, the way she took off from the chair. Then, down she came again with a plop, back into her seat. "Call the fire brigade," she shouted suddenly. "My stomach is on fire." "It's just the medicine, Grandma," George said. "It's good, strong stuff." "Fire," the old woman yelled. "Fire in the basement. Get a bucket." "Man, these hoses. Do something, quick." "Cool it, Grandma," George said. But he got a bit of shock when he saw the smoke coming out of her mouth and out of her nostrils. Clouds of black smoke were coming out of her nose and blowing around the room. "By golly, you really are on fire," George said. "Of course I'm on fire," she yelled. "I'll be burned to a crisp. I'll be fried to a frizzle. I'll be boiled like a beetroot." George ran into the kitchen and came back with a jug of water. "Open your mouth, Grandma," he cried. He could hardly see her for the smoke, but he managed to pour a half jugful down her throat. A sizzling sound, the kind you get if you hold a hot frying pan under a cold tap, came up from the deep down in Grandma's stomach. The old hag bucked and sheet and snorted. She gasped and gurgled. Spouts of water came shouting off her, and the smoke cleared away. "The fire's out," George announced proudly. "You'll be all right now, Grandmother." "All right?" she yelled. "Who's all right? There is Jackie Jumbers in my tummy. There is squirrels in my belly. There's bangers in my bottom." She began bouncing up and down in the chair. Quite obviously, she was not very comfortable. "You find this doing you a lot of good, the medicine, Grandma," George said. "Good?" she screamed. "Doing me good? It's killing me." Then she began to bulk. She was swelling. She was puffing up all over. Someone was pumping her up. That's how it looked. Was she going to explode? Her face was turning from purple to green. But wait, she had a puncture somewhere. George could hear the hiss of escaping air. She stopped swelling. She was going down. She was slowly getting thinner again, shrink back and back, slowly to her shrivelly old self. "How things," Grandma said. No answer. Then a funny thing happened. Grandma's body gave a sudden sharp twist and a sudden sharp jerk, and she flipped herself clear out of the chair and it landed neatly on her 2 feet on the carpet. "Wow, that's terrific, Grandma," George cried. "You haven't stood up like this for years. Look at you. You are standing up all on your own and you're not even using a stick." Grandma didn't even hear him. The frozen pop-eyed look was back with her again now. She was miles away in another world. Marvelous medicine, George told himself. He found it fascinating to stand there and watching what it was doing to the old hag. What next, he wondered. He soon found out. Suddenly, she began to grow. It was quite slow at first, just a very gradual inch and upwards. Up, 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 inch by inch. getting taller and taller, about an inch every few seconds. And in the beginning, George didn't notice it. But when she had passed the 5'6" mark and was going on up towards being 6 feet tall, George gave a jump and shouted, "Hey, Grandma, you are growing. You are going up. Hang on, Grandma. You better stop now or you will be hitting the ceiling." But Grandma didn't stop. It was a truly fantastic sight, this ancient, scrawny old woman getting taller and taller, longer and longer, thinner and thinner, as thought she were a piece of elastic being pulled upwards by invisible hands. When the top of her head actually touched the ceiling, George thought she was bound to stop. But she didn't. There was a sort of scrunching noise, and bits of plaster and cement, and came raining down. "Hadn't you better stop now, Grandma?" George said. Daddy's just had this whole room repainted, but there was no stopping her now. Soon her head and shoulders had completely disappeared through the ceiling, and she was still going. George dashed upstairs to his own bedroom, and there she was coming up through the floor like a mushroom. "Ooh," she shouted, finding her voice at last. "Hallelujah, here I come." "Daddy on Grandma," George said. "With a high nonny no on up we go," she shouted. "Just watch me grow." "This is my room," George said. "Look at the mess you're making." "Terrific medicine," she cried. "Give me some more." "She dirty as donut," George thought. "Come on, boy. Give me some more," she yelled, dished it out. "I'm slowing down." George was clutching the medicine bottle in one hand and the spoon in the other. He thought, why not? He poured out a second dose and popped it into her mouth. "Ooh," she screamed, and up she went again. Her feet were still on the floor downstairs in the living room, but her head was moving quickly towards the ceiling of the bedroom. "I'm on my way, boy," she called down to George. "Just watch me go." "That's the active about you, Grandma," George called. "And keep out of there. It's full of bugs and boggles." Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as she thought it were butter. George stood in front of his bedroom gazing at the thimbles. There was a big hole in the floor and another ceiling, and it sticking up like a post between the two most middle part of Grandma. Her legs were in the room below, her head in the attic. "I'm still going," came the old squishy voice from up above. "Give me another dose, my boy, and let's go through the roof." "No, Grandma, no," George called back. "You are busting up the whole house." "To heck with the house," she shouted. "I want some fresh air. I haven't been outside for 20 years. "My golly, she is going through the roof," George told himself. He ran downstairs. He rushed out of the back door into the yard. It would be simple awful, he thought, if she bashed up the roof as well. His father would be furious, and George get the blame. He had made the medicine. He had given her too much. "Don't come through the roof, Grandma," he prayed. "Please don't." The brown hen. George stood in the farmyard looking up at the roof. The old farmer house had a fine roof of pale, red tiles and tall chimneys. There was no sign of Grandma. There was only a song thrush sitting on of the chimney post, singing a song. The old wurzels got stuck in the attic, George thought. Thank goodness for that. Suddenly, a tile came clattering down from the roof and fell into the yard. The song of thrush took off fast and flew away. Then another tile came down, then a half dozen more. And then, very slow, like some weird monster rising up from the deep, Grandma's head came through the roof. Then her scrawny neck and the tops of her shoulders. "How I'm doing, boy," she shouted. "How's that for a bush-up?" "Don't you think you do better stop now, Grandma?" George called out. "I have stopped," she answered. "I feel terrific." "Didn't I tell you I had a magic powers? Didn't I warn you I had a wizardly in the tips of my fingers? But you wouldn't listen to me, would you? You wouldn't listen to your old grandma. You didn't do it, Grandma," George shouted back there. "I did. I made you a new medicine." "A new medicine? You? What rubbish," she yelled. I did, George shouted. "You're lying as usual," Grandma yelled. "There, you're always lying." "I'm not lying, Grandma, I swear I'm not." The wrinkled old face high up on the roof stared down suspiciously at George. "Are you telling me you actually made a new medicine all by yourself?" "Yes, Grandma, all by myself." "I don't believe you," she answered, "but I'm very comfortable up here. Fetch me a cup of tea." A brown hen was pecking about in the yard close to where George was standing. The hen gave him an idea. Quickly, he uncorked the medicine bottle and poured some of the brown stuff into the spoon. "Watch this, Grandma," he shouted. He crouched down, holding out the spoon to a hen. "Chicken," he said. "Chicken chick. Come here, have some of this." Chickens are stupid birds and very greedy. They think everything is food. This one thought the spoon was full of corn. It hopped over. It put its head on the side and looked at the spoon. "Come on, chicken," George said. "Good chicken. Chick, chick, chick." The brown hen stretched out its neck towards the spoon and went peck. It got a break full of medicine. The effect was electric. "Ooh," shrieked the hen, and it shot straight up into the air like a rocket. It went as high as a house. Then down it came again into the yard, splosh, and there it sat with its feathers all sticking straight out from its body. There was a look of amazement on its silly face. George stood watching it. Grandma up on the roof was watching it too. The hen got its feet. It was rather shaky. It was making funny gurgling noise in his throat. Its beak was opening and shutting. It seemed like a pretty sick hen. "You've done it, you stupid boy," Grandma shouted. "That hen's going to die. Your father be after you now. He give you socks and serve you right." All of a sudden, black smoke started pouring out of the hen's beak. "It's on fire," Grandma yelled. "The hen is on fire." George ran to the water trough to get a bucket of water. Then the hen be roasted and ready for eating in a moment, Grandma shouted. George slushed the bucket of water over the hen. There was a sizzling sound and the smoke went away. "Old hen's laid its last egg," Grandma shouted. "Hens don't do anything after they've been on fire." Now that the fire was out, the hen seemed better. It stood up properly. It flapped its wings. Then it crashed down low to the ground as though getting ready to jump. It did jump. It jumped high in the air and turned a complete somersault, then landed back on its feet. "It's a circus hen," Grandma shouted from the top. "It flapping with a crop." Now the hen began to grow. George had been waiting for this to happen. "It's growing," he yelled. "It's growing, Grandma. Look how it's growing." Bigger and bigger, taller and taller it grew. Soon the hen was 4 or 5 times as normal size. "Can you see it, Grandma?" George shouted. "I can see it, boy," the old girl shouted back. I'm watching it." George was hopping about from one foot to the other with excitement, pointed at the enormous hen and shouting, "It's had the magic medicine, Grandma, and it's growing just like you did." But there was a difference between the way the hen was growing and the way the grandma was growing. When the grandma grew taller and taller, she got thinner and thinner. Then hen didn't. It stayed nice and plump all along. Soon it was taller than George, but it didn't stop there. It went right on growing until it was about as big as a horse. Then it stopped. "Doesn't it look marvelous, Grandma?" George shouted. "It's not as tall as me," Grandma sang out. "Compared with me, that hen is a itchy small. I am the tallest of them all." The pig, the bullocks, the sheep, the pony, and the nanny goat. At that moment, George's mother came back from shopping in the village. She drove her car into the yard and got out. She was crying, a bottle of milk in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. The first thing she saw was the gigantic brown hen towering over little George. She dropped the bottle of milk. Then Grandma started shouting at her from the rooftop, and when she looked up and saw Grandma's head sticking up through the tiles, she dropped the bag of groceries. "How about that, then, Mary?" Grandma shouted. "I'll bet you never seen a hen as big as that." "That's George's giant hen, that is." "But," stammered George's mother. "It's George's magic medicine," Grandma shouted. "We both of us had it. Then the hen and I." "But how in the world did you get up on the roof?" cried the mother. "I didn't," crackled the old woman. "My feet are still standing on the floor in the living room." This was too much for George's mother to understand. She just goggled and gaped. She looked as though she was going to faint. A second later, George's father appears. His name was Mr. Kylie Cranky. Mr. Cranky was a small man with bendy legs and a huge head. He was a kind father to George, but he was not an easy person to live with, because even the smallest things got him all worked up and excited. The hen standing in the yard was certainly not a small thing, and when Mr. Cranky saw it, he started to jump about as thought something was burning his feet. "Great heaven," he cried, waving his arms. "What is this? What has happened? Where did it come from? Is it a giant hen? Who did this?" "I did," George said. "Look at me," Grandma shouted from the rooftop. "Never mind about the hen. What about me?" Mr. Crank looked up and saw Grandma. "Shut up, Grandma," he said. It didn't seem to surprise him that the old girl was sticking up the throat through the roof. It was the hen that excited him. He had never seen anything like that. But then, who had? "It's fantastic," Mr. Cranky shouted, dancing round and round. "It's colossal. It's gigantic. It's tremendous. It's it's a miracle." "How did you get to do it, George?" George started telling his father about the magic medicine. While he was doing this, the big brown hen sat down in the middle of the yard and went cluck, cluck, cluck. Everyone stared at it. When it stopped again, there was a brown egg lying there. The egg was the size of a football. "The egg would make scrambled eggs for 20 people, Mr. Cranky said. "George," Mr. Cranky shouted, "how much of the medicine have you got?" "Lots," George said. "There's a big saucepan full in the kitchen, and this bottle here is nearly full." "Come with me," Mr. Cranky yelled, grabbing George by the arm. "Bring the medicine." "For years and years, I've been trying to breed bigger and bigger animals. Bigger bulls for beef, bigger pigs for pork, bigger sheep for mutton. They want to be the biggest. George gave a spoonful of medicine to the pig. The pig blew in smoke from its nose and jumped all over the place. Then it grew. And in the end, it looked like this. They went to the herd of a fine black bulldogs that Mr. Cranky was trying to fatten for the market. George gave each of them medicine, and this is what happened. Then the sheep. He gave some to his grey pony, and finally, just for fun, he gave some to Alma, the nanny goat. A crane for Grandma. Grandma from high up on the rooftop could see everything that was going on, and she didn't like what she saw. She wanted to be the center of attention, and nobody was talking the slightest noise of her. George and Mr. Cranky were running around and getting excited about the enormous animals. Mrs. Cranky was washing up in the kitchen, and Grandma was alone on the rooftop. "Hey you," she yelled. "George, get me a cup of tea this minute, you idle little beast." "Don't listen to the old gold," Mr. Cranky said. "She's stuck where she is, and a good thing too." "But we can't leave her up there, Dad," George said. "What if it rains?" "George," Grandma yelled. "Oh, you horrible little boy, you disgusting little worm, fetch me a cup of tea at once and slice of a currant cake." "We have to get her out, Dad," George said. "She won't give us any peace if we don't." Mr. Cranky came outside, and she agreed with George. "She's my own mother," she said. "She's a pain in the neck," Mr. Cranky said. "I don't care," Mrs. Cranky said. "I'm not leaving my own mother sticking up through the roof for the rest of her life." So in the end, Mr. Cranky telephoned the crane company and asked them to send the biggest crane of this house at once. The crane arrived an hour later. It was on wheels, and there were 2 men inside it. The crane man climbed up on the roof and put ropes under Grandma's arms. Then she was lifted right up through the roof. In a way, the medicine had done Grandma good. It had not made her in any less grumpy or bad-tempered, but it seemed to have cured all her aches and pain, and she was suddenly as frisky as a ferret. As soon as the crane lowered her to the ground, she ran over to George's huge pony, Jack Frost, and jumped on his back. This ancient old hag, who was now as tall as a house, then galloped about the farm, and the giant pony, jumping over trees and sheets and shouting, "Out of my way, clear the disc, stand back. All you miserable midgets, or I'll trample you to death," and other silly things like that. But because Grandma was now much taller to get back into the house, she had to sleep that night in the hay barn with the mice and the rats. Mr. Cranky's great idea. The next day, George's father came down to breakfast in a state of greater excitement than ever. "I've been awake all night thinking about it," he cried. "About what, Dad?" George asked him. "About your marvelous medicine, of course. We can't stop now, boy. We must start making more of it at once. More and more and more." The giant saucepan had been completely emptied the day before because there had been so many sheep and pigs and cows and bullocks to be dosed. "But why do we need more, Dad?" George asked. "We've done all our own animals, and few made Grandma feel as frisky as a ferret, even though she does have to sleep in the barn. "My dear boy," cried Mr. Killicrank, "we need barrels and barrels of it, tons and tons. Then we will sell it to every farmer in the world so that all of them can have a giant animal. We will build a marvellous medicine factory and sell the stuff in bottles at 5 pounds a time. We will become rich and you will become famous." "But wait a minute, Dad," George said. "There's no waiting," cried Mr. Cranky, working himself up so much that he put butter in his coffee and milk on his toast. "Don't you understand what this tremendous invention of yours is going to do to the world? Nobody will ever go hungry again." "Why won't they?" asked George. "Because one giant cow will give 50 buckets of milk a day," cried Mr. Cranky, waving his arms. "One giant chicken will make 100 fried chicken dinners, and one giant pig will give you 1,000 pork chops. It's tremendous, my dear boy. It's fantastic. It's changed the world." "But wait a minute, Dad," George said again. "Don't keep saying, 'Wait a minute,'" shouted Mr. Cranky. "There isn't a minute to wait. We must go and get cracking at once." "Do calm down, my dear," Mrs. Cranky said from the other end of the table, "and stop putting marmalade on your cornflakes." "The heck with my cornflakes," cried Mr. Cranky, leaping up from his chair. "Come on, George, let's get going. And the first thing we do is to make one more saucepanful as a test." "But Dad," said little George, "the trouble is—" "There won't be any trouble, boy," cried Mr. Cranky. "How can there possibly be any trouble? All you got to do is put the same stuff into the saucepan as you did yesterday. And while you are doing it, I will write down each and every item. That's how we get the magic recipe." "But Dad," said George, "please listen to me." "Why don't you listen to him?" Mrs. Cranky said. "The boy is trying to tell you something." But Mr. Cranky was too excited to listen to anyone except himself. And then he cried, "When the new mixture is ready, we will test it out on an old hen, just to make absolutely sure we got it right. And after that, we shout hooray and build the giant factory." "But Dad, come on then, what is it you want to say?" "I can't possibly remember all 100 of giant things I put in the saucepan to make the medicine," George said. "Of course you can, my dear boy," cried Mr. Cranky. "I will help you. I'll jog your memory. You get in the end. You see if you don't. Now, then, what was the first thing you put in?" "I went up in the bathroom first," George said. "I used a lot of things in the bathroom and on Mummy's dressing table." "Come on then," cried Mr. Killicranky. "Up we go to the bathroom." When they got there, they found, of course, a whole lot of empty tubes and empty aerials and empty bottles. "That's great," said Mr. Cranky. "That tells us exactly what you use. If anything is empty, it means you used it." So Mr. Cranky started making a list of everything that was empty in the bathroom. Then they went to Mrs. Cranky's dressing table. "A box of powder," said Mr. Cranky, writing it down. "Helga's hair set, flowers of turnips parfum. Terrific. This is going to be easy. Where did you go next?" "To the laundry room," George said. "But are you sure you haven't missed anything out of here, Daddy?" "That's up to you, my boy," Mr. Cranky said. "Have I?" "I don't think so," George said. So down they went to the laundry room, and once again Mr. Cranky wrote down the names of all the empty bottles and cans. "My goodness me, what a mess of stuff you used," he cried. "No wonder it did magic things. It's a lot." No, Dad, it's not, George said, and he led his father out of the sheet where the animal medicine were kept and showed him the 5 empty big bottles up on the shelf. Mr. Cranky wrote down all the names. Anything else? Mr. Cranky asked. Little George scratched his head and thought, but he couldn't remember having put anything else in. Mr. Killycrank leaped into his car and drove down to the village and bought new bottles and tubes and cans of everything on his list. He then went to the vet and got fresh supply of all the animals' medicine George had used. Now show me how you did it, George, he said. Come along, show me exactly how you mixed them all together. Marvelous medicine number 2. They were in the kitchen now, and the big saucepan was on the stove. All the things Mr. Cranky had bought were lined up near the sink. Come along, my boy, cried Mr. Killycranky. Which do you put in first? This one, George said. Golden Gloss hair shampoo. He emptied the bottle in the pan. Now the toothpaste, George went on, and the shaving soap, and the face cream, and the nail varnish. Keep at it, my boy, cried Mr. Cranky, dancing around in the kitchen. Keep putting them in. Don't stop. Don't pause. Don't hesitate. It's a pleasure, my dear fellow, to watch your work. One by one, George poured and squeezed the things into the saucepan. With everything so close at hand, the whole job didn't take him more than 10 minutes. But when it was all done, the saucepan didn't somehow seem to be quite as full as it had been the first time. Now, what did you do? Cried Mr. Cranky. Did you steer it? I boiled it, George said. But not for long, and I steer it as well. So Mr. Cranky lit the gas under the saucepan, and George stirred the mixture with the same long wooden spoon he had used before. It's not brown enough, George said. Wait a minute, I know what I've forgotten. What? Cried Mr. Crank. Tell me quick. Because if we have forgotten even one tiny thing, then it won't work, at least not in the same way. A quart of brown gloss paint, George said. That's what I have forgotten. Mr. Killycrank shot out of the house and into his car like a rocket. He sped down to the village and bought the paint and rushed back again. He opened the can in the kitchen and handed it to George. George poured the pen into the saucepan. Ah, that's better, George said. That's more like the right color. It's boiling, cried Mr. Crank. It's boiling and bubbling, George. It's ready yet? It's ready, George said. At least I hope it is. Right, shouted Mr. Cranky, hopping about. Let's test it. Let's give some to a chicken. My heavens alive, why don't you calm down a bit, Mrs. Cranky said, coming into the kitchen. Calm down, cried Mr. Cranky. You expect me to calm down, and here we are mixing up the greatest medicine ever discovered in the history of the world. Come along, George. Dip a cupful out of the saucepan and get a spoon, and we'll give some to a chicken, just to make absolutely certain we got the correct mixture. Outside in the yard, there were several chickens that hadn't any of George's marvelous medicine number 1. They were pecking about in the dirt in the silly way chickens do. George crouched down, holding out a spoonful of marvelous medicine number 2. Come on, chicken, he said. Good, chicken. Chick, chick, chick. A white chicken with black speaks on its feathers looked up to George. It walked over the spoon and went pick. The effect that the medicine number 2 had on this chicken was not quite the same as the effect that produced by medicine number 1. but it was very interesting. Whoosh, shred the chicken, and it shot 6 feet up in the air and came down again. Then sparks came flying out of his beak, bright yellow sparks of fire. It thought someone was sharpening a knife on a grindstone inside its tummy. Then its legs began to grow longer. Its body stayed the same size, but the 2 thin yellow legs got longer and longer. "What happening to it?" cried Mr. Kelly Cranky. "Something went wrong," George said. The legs went on growing, and the more they grew, the higher up in the air went the chicken's body. When the legs were about 15 feet long, they stopped growing. The chicken looked perfectly absurd with his long legs and its ordinary little body perched high up on top. It was like a chicken on stilts. "Oh, my sainted ounce," cried Mr. Kelly Cranky. "We got it wrong. This chicken's no good to anybody. It's our legs. No one wants chicken legs." "I must have left something out," George said. "I know you left something out," cried Mr. Cranky. "Think, boy, think, what was it you left out?" "I've got it," said George. "What was it, quick?" "Flea powder for dogs," George said. "You mean you put flea powder in the first one?" "Yes, Dad, I did, a whole carton of it." "Then that's the answer." "Wait a minute," said George. "Did we have brown shoe polish on our list?" "We did not," said Mr. Cranky. "I used that too." "Well, no wonder it went wrong," said Mr. Cranky. He was already running to his car, and soon he was hiding down to the village to buy more flea powder and more shoe polish. Marvelous medicine number 3. "Here it is," cried Mr. Kelly Cranky, rushing into the kitchen. 1 carton of flea powder for dogs, and 1 tin of brown shoe polish. George poured the flea powder into the giant saucepan. Then he scooped the shoe polish out of its tin and added that as well. "Stir it up, George," shouted Mr. Cranky. "Give it another boil." "We got this time. I bet we got it." After marvelous medicine number 3 had been boiled and stirred, George took a cupful of it out into the yard to try at another chicken. Mr. Cranky ran after him, flapping his arms and hopping with excitement. "Come and watch this one," he called out to Mrs. Cranky. "Come and watch us turning an ordinary chicken into a lovely great big one that lays eggs as large as a football's." "I hope you do better than last time," said Mrs. Cranky, following them out. "Come on, chicken," said George, holding out a spoonful of medicine number 3. "Good chicken, chick, chick, chick. Have some of this lovely medicine." A magnificent black crockle with a scarlet comb came stepping over. The crockle looked at the spoon and it went peck. "Cock-a-doodle-doo," squawked the crockle, shooting up in the air and coming down again. "Watch him now," cried Mr. Crank. "Watch him grow. Any moment he's going to start getting bigger and bigger." Mr. Kelly Cranky, Mrs. Cranky, and little George stood in the yard staring at the black cockle. The cockle stood quite still. It looked as though it had a headache. "What's happening to its neck?" Mrs. Cranky said. "It's getting longer." "I say it's getting longer," Mrs. Cranky said. Mr. Cranky for once said nothing. "Last time it was the legs," Mrs. Cranky said. "Now it is the neck. Who wants a chicken with a long neck?" You can't eat a chicken's neck. It was an extraordinary sight. The cockle's body had grown at all, but the neck was now about 6 feet long. "All right, George," Mr. Cranky said. "What else have you forgotten?" "I don't know," said George. "Oh yes, You do, Mr. Cranky said. Come along, boy, think. There's probably just one vital thing missing, and you have to remember it. It put in some engine oil from the garage, George said. Did you have that on your list? Eureka, cried Mr. Cranky. That's the answer. How much did you put in? Half a pint, George said. Mr. Cranky ran to the garage and found another half pint of oil. And some antifreeze, George called after him. I sloshed in a bit of antifreeze. Marvelous medicine number 4. Back in the kitchen once again, George, with Mr. Cranky watching him anxiously, tipped half a pint of engine oil and some antifreeze into the giant saucepan. Boil it up again, cried Mr. Cranky. Boil it and stir it. George boiled it and stirred it. You never get it right, said Mrs. Cranky. Don't forget you don't just have the same things, but you've got to have exactly the same amount of those things. And how you can possibly do that? You keep out of this, cried Mr. Crank. We are doing fine. We got it this time. You see if we haven't. This was George's marvelous medicine number 4. And when it had boiled for a couple of minutes, George once again carried a cup full of it out into the yard. Mr. Cranky ran after him. Mrs. Cranky followed more slowly. You are going to have some mighty queer chickens around here if you go on like this, she said. Dish it out, George, cried Mr. Cranky. Give a spoonful to that one over there. He pointed to a brown hen. George kneeled down and held out the spoon with the new medicine in it. Chick, chick, he said. Try some of this. The brown hen walked over and looked at the spoon. Then it went peck. Ouch, it said. Then a funny whistling noise came out of his beak. Watch it grow, shouted Mr. Cranky. Don't be too sure, said Mrs. Cranky. Why is it whistling like this? Keep quiet, Vomit, cried Mr. Cranky. Give it a chance. They stood there staring at the brown hen. It's getting smaller, George said. Look at it, Dad. It's shrinking. And indeed it was. In less than a minute, the hen had shrunk so much it was no bigger than a new hatched chicken. It looked ridiculous. Goodbye, Grandma. There's still something you left out, Mr. Cranky said. I can't think what it could be. Give it up, Mrs. Cranky said. Pack it in. You never get it right. Mr. Cranky looked very forlorn. George looked pretty fed up too. He was still kneeling on the ground with a spoon in one hand and the cup full of medicine in the other. The ridiculous tiny brown hen was walking slowly away. At that point, Grandma came staring into the yard. From her enormous height, she glared down at the 3 people below her and she shouted, "What's going on around here? Why hasn't anyone brought me my morning cup of tea? It's bad enough having to sleep in the yard with the rats and the mice, but I be blowed if I'm going to starve as well. No tea, no eggs and bacon, no buttered toast." "I'm sorry, Mother," Mrs. Cranky said. "We got been terrible busy. I'll get you something right away." "Let George get it, the lazy little brute," Grandma shouted. Just then the old woman spotted the cup in George's hand. She bent down and peered into it. She saw that it was full of brown liquid. It looked very much like tea. "Oh," she cried. "So that's your little game, is it? You look after yourself, all right, don't you? You make quite sure you got a nice cup of morning tea, but you didn't think to bring one of your poor old grandma. I always knew you were a selfish pig." "No, Grandma," George said, "that isn't—" "Don't lie to me, boy," the enormous old hag shouted. "Pass it up here, it's mine." "No," cried Mrs. Cranky. "No, Mother, don't. That's not for you." "Now, you're against me too?" shouted Grandmother. "My own daughter trying to stop me having my breakfast, trying to starve me out." Mr. Cranky looked up at the horrid old woman and he smiled sweetly. "Of course it's for you, Grandma," he said. "You take it and drink it while it's nice and hot." "Don't think I won't," Grandma said, bending down from her great height and reaching out a huge, horny hand for the cup. "Hand it over, George." "No, Grandma," George cried out, pulling the cup away. "You mustn't. You are not to have it." "Give it to me, boy," yelled Grandma. "Don't," cried Mrs. Cranky. "That's George's marvellous—" "Everything George's round here," shouted Grandma. "George this, George that. I'm fed up with it." She snatched the cup off the little George's hand and carried it high up out of the reach. "Drink it up, Grandma," Mr. Cranky said, bringing ugly, lovely tea. "No," the other two cried, but it was too late. The ancient beanpole had already put the cup to her lips, and in one gulp she swallowed everything that was in it. "Mother," wailed Mrs. Cranky, "you just drank 50 doses of George's marvellous medicine number 4, and look what one tiny spoonful did to the little old brown hen." But Grandma didn't even hear it. Great clouds of steam were already pouring out of her mouth, and she was beginning to whistle. "This is going to be interesting," Mr. Cranky said, still grinning. "Now, you done it," cried Mrs. Cranky, glaring at her husband. "You cooked the old girl's goose." "I didn't do anything," Mr. Cranky said. "Oh, yes, you did. You told her to drink it." A tremendous hissing sound was coming from above their heads. Steam was shouting out of Grandmother's mouth and nose and ears and whistling as it came. "She'll feel better after she's let off a bit of steam," Mr. Cranky said. "She's going to blow up," Mrs. Cranky wailed. "Her boiler's going to burst." "Stand clear," Mr. Crank said. George was quite alarmed. He stood up and ran back a few paces. The jets of white steam kept squirting out of the skinny old hag's head, and the whistling was so high and shrill that it hurt the ears. "Call the fire brigade," cried Mrs. Cranky. "Call the police. Man the hose pipes." "Too late," said Mrs. Cranky, looking pleased. Grandma shrieked, "Mrs. Cranky, Mother, run to the drinking through and put your head under the water." But even as she spoke, the whistling suddenly stopped and the steam disappeared. That was when Grandma began to get smaller. She had started off with her head as high as the roof of the house, but now she was coming down fast. "What's this, George?" Mr. Crank shouted, hopping around the yard and flapping his arms. "Watch what happened. Someone's had 50 spoonfuls instead of 1. Very soon, Grandma was back to normal height. "Stop!" cried Mrs. Cranky. "That's just right." But she didn't stop. Smaller and smaller she got. Down and down she went. In another half of a minute, she was no bigger than a bottle of lemonade. "How do you feel, Mother?" asked Miss Cranky anxiously. Grandma's tiny face still bore the same full and furious expression it had always had. Her eyes, now bigger than little keyholes, were blazing with anger. "How do I feel?" she yelled. "How do you think I feel? How would you feel if you'd been a glorious giant a minute ago and suddenly you're a miserable midget?" She's still going, shouted Mr. Cranky gleefully. She is still getting smaller. And by golly, she was. When she was no bigger than a cigarette, Mrs. Cranky made a grab for her. She held her in her hands and she cried, "How do I stop getting her small?" "You can," said Mr. Cranky. She had 50 times the right amount. "It must stop her," Mrs. Cranky wailed. "I can hardly see her as it is." "Catch hold of each and pull," Mr. Cranky said. By then, Grandma was the size of a matchstick and still shrinking fast. A moment later, she was no bigger than a pin, then a pumping seed. And then, "Where is she?" cried Mr. Cranky. "I've lost her." "Hooray!" said Mr. Cranky. "She's gone. She disappeared completely," cried Mrs. Cranky. "That what happens to you if you're grumpy and bad-tempered," said Mr. Cranky. "Great medicine of your George." George didn't know what to think. For a few minutes, Mr. Cranky kept wandering around with a puzzled look on her face, saying, "Mother, where are you? Where you gone? Where you got to? How can I find you?" But she calmed down quite quickly, and by lunchtime she was saying, "Ah, well, I suppose it's all for the best." She was a bit of a nuisance around the house, wasn't she? Nuisance. Never heard this word. "Yes," Mr. Cranky said. "She most certainly was." George didn't say a word. He felt quite trembly. He knew something tremendous had taken place that morning. For a few brief moments he had touched with the very tips of his fingers the edge of a magic word. And this was the book George's Marvelous Medicine from Roald Dahl. I read it in 2 sequences. So if you now just listen to the second part, click yourself through my timeline to find the first part of the book to get the full story. I have here the full Roald collection and the book's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you are interested, follow, subscribe, click on the notification bell and let a comment here that I can read even more books in the future here on my ASMR channel. And Roald Dahl have a few amazing books waiting for you. He wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Fabric and Matilda, where you might know the book from. And these stories as well, who are very entertaining for young people and also for adults. So no matter which age you have, this could be your way to calm down, to relax, and to listen to the words I whisper in your ear. My name is ASMR Katz, and I am your heavily tattooed red girl who shows you the satisfaction of sound. And I hope that you don't take this marvelous medicine too serious. But if you do, let me know what it does to you. Send me your pictures afterwards. And otherwise, I just wish you a very good and happy time wherever you are right now on this earth. Tell all your friends about my channel, and if you are able to see the beauty behind ASMR, then feel free to click on all the other videos I have in stock for you. And if you are more interested in a person like me, then check out the section where I read all about the video itself, because there I also have some links for you waiting that show you my adult entertainment world. And now I also will put out my headphones and will stop the video. And I hope that I will see you the next time here as well on my ASMR YouTube channel. And until then, don't let yourself stressed. Enjoy and live a good life.